In this video, I'm going to be sharing 10 top secret quests that I'd bet the vast majority of players have no idea exist. Why? Well, because these aren't quests that Skyrim simply hands to you. They're quests that the game either never explains, never properly marks, or even quietly continues after you think you're finished, resulting in you missing out on some great experiences. Anyway, let's get straight into it with quest number 1. And a big thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. More on them in a bit. Now, what if I told you that there was a quest in the game that involves travelling to a completely unique island fortress that's impossible to visit outside of this quest, without cheating that is, in order to take down a pirate sorcerer in pursuit of, well, let's be honest, financial profits for the East Empire Company. It's a cool quest, but let's not pretend we're doing anything but greasing the wheels of imperial capitalism here. Nonetheless, in this case we are talking about taking out Bloodhawker pirates, primarily thieves and murderers, so no need to feel too guilty about it. This quest has always felt pretty bizarre to me, as it's a significant set piece with, like I said, an entirely unique island associated with it, but even after all of these years, it's still one that a huge number of players seem to miss entirely. Why is this the case? Well, I suspect it's to do with the fact that unless you randomly walk into an empty office in the Windhelm docks, which is also a fairly random location to visit unless you're travelling to Solstheim, and then proceed to strike up a conversation with the NPC that you'll find sweeping the floor in that office, then you're never really going to know that this quest exists. Anyway, if you do decide to enter the East Empire Company office and speak to Orphus and Dario, floor sweeper extraordinaire, then you'll learn that the East Empire Company has fallen on difficult times. The CEO is now only taking 3 trips to Skyrim's premier skiing resort each year rather than his customary 4. Truly, my heart bleeds for him. However, there's coin on the table for us as well, so naturally we're going to get in bed with this incredibly oppressive corporate entity for our own personal gain. Now, Orphus suspects that the East Empire Company's misfortune has come courtesy of their competitor, the Shattershield clan, and he believes that they're hiring pirates to interfere with their primary shipping route. Your task is to go about proving this theory by breaking into the Shattershield clan's office and stealing their logbook, bribing a very disloyal member of said pirate crew for information on the location of the pirates, and then heading over to the island fortress to give them a jolly good seeing to, and of course stealing all of their tasty loot while you're at it. Once you've done this, it's back to Windhelm for tea and medals, and your reward of 1500 gold, which, to be honest, feels like crumbs from the table when it comes to such a wealthy organisation, especially after having risked your life to keep the company afloat, and even being bombarded by the East Empire Company's own cannons on your way out of the fortress, apparently by accident. The real moral of this story, of course, is that the Shattershield clan should have been more careful with their data. I mean, how easy was it for me to get my hands on that logbook? Speaking of which, if you want to prevent advertisers and cyber criminals from tracking your data and avoid having your personal details stolen like the Shattershield clan, then you should use my code to get a discount from today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Not only will it keep your online identity safe by encrypting all of the information sent between your device and the internet, Surfshark VPN will even give you peace of mind when you're downloading the gazillion Skyrim add-ons that you insist are totally essential for your latest playthrough by using its clean web feature that will scan your downloads for malware, ensuring your system is not compromised in the process, and just generally allow you to surf the web safely. It's also zero risk to give it a try due to Surfshark's 30-day money-back guarantee. So why not give Surfshark a try by using my discount code that you can find in the description or pinned comment down below and protect your online identity today. Next up is a very easily missed quest in which you investigate the absolutely brutal demise of a poor Redguard family who had recently migrated to Skyrim, and that offers a rather powerful permanent buff as your reward. I'm talking about the miscellaneous quest found at Frostflow Lighthouse, a location that, while fairly obvious due to, it being a big old lighthouse on a hill, is rarely visited by the majority of players as you're just never given a specific reason to visit the location, and therefore end up missing out on one of Skyrim's darkest storylines and coolest hidden dungeons. Now, when you approach Frostflow Lighthouse to the west of Winterhold, it's immediately clear that whoever lives here isn't having their best day. The first giveaway is the fate of the family horse, who was already probably pretty pissed off that he was dragged from sun-kissed Hammerfell to this frozen hellscape. Unfortunately, things only get worse when you enter the lighthouse itself and find the corpse of Ramati, who turns out to be the mother in this story, as well as the corpse of the monster who was presumably responsible for her demise. If we loot Ramati, we find her husband's journal, which, if we read it, tells us how they saved up for years to buy their dream property, which, for whatever reason, is a lighthouse on a brutally cold and inhospitable snowy mountain. Each to their own, I guess. Anyway, the journal quickly takes a rather dark turn when it describes how this poor man came back to find his murdered wife and then subsequently ventured into the basement to make sure that these creatures couldn't reach the rest of his family. And to be doubly sure, he locked the door behind him. And this is where the story becomes truly tragic, because if you read Sudi, the daughter's journal, in the next room, you find out that her brother Manny is constantly venturing into the basement despite her begging him not to, which hints that he may already be down there. And at this point, presumably locked down there by his own father. The final entry in Sudi's diary reads that the scratches from down below are getting louder and louder. Then it cuts off. If you then choose to venture into the basement to investigate, on entering you will quickly realise that the basement is a little larger than one might expect, opening up into a hidden Falmer-infested dungeon below the lighthouse, where you sadly find that none of the poor Redguard family survived, with Manny having been slain in the first room, the father having been unceremoniously gobbled down by the massive Chorus Queen at the end of the dungeon, and most tragically of all, Sudi, the only one who had taken the threat seriously from the very beginning, having taken her own life rather than suffer the same fate as her father. A truly brutal outcome for this quest. But on the plus side, and this is the part that a lot of people miss even if they find and complete the quest, there is a hint in Ramati's journal that tells you where her husband wished to be laid to rest, in the fires of the lighthouse as it turns out. And if you recover his remains and take them up to the top of the lighthouse to burn them, then you get the Sailor's Repose buff that offers a pretty spicy 10% permanent increase to your healing spell output. So a whole family has been wiped out, but on the plus side you have marginally better survivability for restoration based builds. Honestly, I don't know how you sleep at night. Moving on to the hidden quest that gives you access to the only Argonian follower in the entire game. And this one is particularly easy to miss as there is no journal entry or quest marker involved at all, only a dialogue hint from an obscure NPC that you will find in the mines of Darkwater Crossing, which feels like a rather sleepy corner of Skyrim until you visit and not one but two dragons randomly spawn in. Anyway, despite its apparent popularity with dragons, there isn't much reason to visit Darkwater Crossing, and even less reason to go into the mine itself and speak to this guy, Sondus Drenim. However, if you do, he has a dialogue option that will prompt him to tell you about an Argonian known as Dirkifus, who has not returned home after deciding to go fishing in an obviously dangerous cave called Darkwater Pass. Classic Argonian behaviour, to be honest. However, that's it. That's all you get. No quest is started at this point and no marker is placed on your map. I'm not sure if it's an oversight by the developers or if it's an intentional hidden quest. I think it's probably the former, as it's been fixed in the unofficial Skyrim patch. However, if you head over to Darkwater Pass and fight through the dungeon until you reach this rather difficult to spot lever, another reason this quest remains so well hidden, then you will find Dirkifus splashing around in a shallow pool of water like an idiot. If you then proceed to escort this frankly undeserving lizard out of the dungeon, then he will become your follower. Like I said, the only Argonian follower in the game. So for anyone who just can't get enough lizards in their life, this is a truly wonderful quest to complete. Now, I'm kind of hoping that despite most veterans knowing about the first two quests, that I might have caught at least someone off guard with this one. No? Okay, well let's try a little harder then. For this next one, you have to randomly decide to sleep in an inn in the middle of nowhere to trigger it. And that's because it's not until you start a conversation with the innkeeper, Adis, that you realise she has an unusual offering, that is to rent not just any room, but the room of Tiber Septim, the first emperor of the Septim dynasty that ruled Tamriel for hundreds of years. I just hope they washed the sheets in that time. If you take Adis up on this offer to sleep in the Emperor's bed for the low price of 10 gold, then you will awake to a loud scream and a rather wound up Adis telling you that the ghost of one of Tiber Septim's soldiers has appeared in the tavern. And if she didn't so annoyingly block the door, we could even see them for ourselves. Now, if you do manage to defeat door boss Adis and then find your way out, you'll find that she was in fact telling the truth, and you'll meet the ghost of a man who seems to think that you are his friend Hjalti, who in reality has presumably been dead for hundreds of years. He then continues to talk about a promise you had made him hundreds of years ago to become battle brothers, and it turns out that to do so, you need to retrieve Hjalti's sword from a random dungeon location, in my case it was Serpent's Bluff, and then return it to the ghost. This will convince the ghost that you are now indeed battle brothers, and it will release him from this unfinished deed that was tethering him to the mortal plane. As your reward, he provides you with a 1-point bonus to both your one-handed and block skills, though mine were already maxed out, so he's probably laughing at the fact that he got me to do the job for free. But I still got the last laugh, as it's going to be a little bit embarrassing for him when he reaches Sovngarde to discover that the real Hjalti has been drinking and feasting with the gods for half a millennia and doesn't have a clue what he's going on about. Okay, if that one still wasn't hidden enough, let's escalate it to a hidden objective that requires you not only to be in a very specific and random location, but also to be there at a specific time. The location I'm talking about is the Kjensteg ruins, found to the east of Morfal, where if you visit specifically between the hours of 8 PM and 5 AM, you will find a ghost, who, if you then continue to follow beyond the point that you've drawn the conclusion that he's just running at random due to his very weird pathing, you will come across a small unmarked barrow, presumably his. At the barrow, you will find a couple of bandits who were probably there to rob the grave, and if you dispatch them for this unthinkable act of desecration of an ancient Nordic tomb, then you'll have free rein to desecrate it for yourself. Hey, I never said I was the hero in this story. I do wonder why the ghost was so keen to lead us here given this pretty inevitable outcome, though maybe he thought it's more dignified to be robbed by the Dragonborn rather than some low-level bandits, and to be fair, he's probably right. At least he's going to have a story to tell in Sovngarde, and it's still going to be far less embarrassing than it will be for the bloke who thought I was Hjalti. Anyway, within the barrow you'll find 3 items of levelled loot, a necklace, weapon and shield, which is a pretty decent haul actually, as well as a skill book from one of the bandits. And if you really have no morals whatsoever, you can even dispatch the friendly ghost before he reaches the barrow in order to loot his ancient Nordic armour. The next quest on our list is Drowned Sorrows, a quest that, if you're focused on entering the College of Winterhold on your first visit to Winterhold, as most people typically are, you'll probably miss. This is due to the fact that despite you probably overhearing an argument between Haran and Ranmir in the streets of Winterhold, the related quest, Drowned Sorrows in this case, is not added to your journal as it would be for most other quests of this nature. However, if you follow them into the pub, then you will find that while Ranmir won't talk to you, Haran is quite happy to spill the beans on Ranmir's drinking habit, and will tell you about the significant debt that he's accumulated at her inn. If you're kind enough to speak to Ranmir and offer to pay off his tab, which is a ludicrous amount of money and quite frankly highlights the fact that Haran should have her license revoked more than anything else. Anyway, if you pay the debt, the quest just seems to end there, and you're thinking, why on earth did I just waste all of that gold? However, if you then randomly speak to Haran's husband, and you'd have no way of knowing that this is what you needed to do next, he will have a new dialogue option that frankly looks in no way connected to Ranmir's story at all. Specifically, it reads, "Does anything need doing around here?" Now, this is the second reason that barely anyone playing unmodded Skyrim ever completes this quest. Not only is there no quest journal entry, it's just so incredibly random how it progresses. Anyway, if you take this option, the innkeeper will give you Ranmir's full story, which essentially involves the love of his life running off with another man, or so he thought. Of course, once again you get no quest in your journal, so you have no idea who to talk to next. You'd think it would be Ranmir, but he won't talk to you, so instead you need to speak to Haran again, who will give you a lead involving a man called Vex in the Thieves Guild. Now, anyone who's joined the Thieves Guild will know that Vex ain't no man, but we go and speak to her anyway. And as it turns out, Ranmir's love, Isabel, actually sought out the Thieves Guild in order to make some money for herself and Ranmir's future, but was utterly unequipped for the challenge and ended up dead, presumably because she decided to enter a glacial cave wearing nothing but a bikini and froze to death. At least you're able to return to Ranmir to offer him some closure. And for helping him to reach this very important closure in his life, he rewards you with an enormous pile of absolutely nothing, the miserly git. Now, if you knew about that one without having installed the unofficial Skyrim patch, then damn, I might actually be running out of tricks here. But not quite yet. How about a secret quest that has you summoning a demonic pirate beneath the College of Winterhold? This particular quest, Forgotten Names, is another one of those unmarked delights that you simply have to stumble upon and work out for yourself. Come to think of it, a lot of these secret quests are literally just what quests used to be before games started holding our hand quite so aggressively. Anyway, if you enter the dusty halls of the Midden through one of the trapdoors in the College of Winterhold, and then make your way to the Midden Dark, you will find a mysterious Dremora gauntlet. However, if you try to interact with this gauntlet, nothing will happen. But what's that you glance over there on the table? A journal of some description, you smart little sausage. And if you go and investigate that journal, you'll discover that a group of students attempted a dark ritual using this gauntlet along with a set of rings and were subsequently found dead, with those rings now being stored in the college Arcanium. Now, any sensible person would probably take the decision not to attempt the ritual themselves, given the success rate so far. But you're the goddamn Dragonborn, so rather than acting in self-preservation, you can enter the Arcanium, wait until Orc Boy over here isn't looking, and then steal these students' rings from this chest. Then it's back down to the Midden Dark to apply the rings to the gauntlet one by one in order to start the ritual, which, as it turns out, summons a rather grumpy Dremora pirate called Velok Sane, who you can choose to either kill for very mediocre rewards, or you can set him free to release carnage and death upon countless unsuspecting innocents in exchange for his treasure map. Now, this is going to sound a little immoral, but it's actually a crap ton of treasure. So, sorry unsuspecting innocents, but Daddy needs himself a shiny new player house. And if you're wondering where to find the treasure, it's at this location on the map just to the west of Winterhold. Now, these final 3 quest objectives are what I would describe as hidden in plain sight. Basically, they pop up with typically only minimal dialogue hints when your attention is elsewhere, so they're often missed. The first of these is gaining the Exquisite Sapphire from, well, Sapphire, a member of the Thieves Guild, and this sapphire is worth the same amount as the player house in Whiterun, 5,000 gold to be precise, so it's worth paying attention to. However, the reason that it is so often missed is that it has very, very specific requirements. From my research and trying it myself, it appears that firstly you have to have joined the Thieves Guild, spoken to Tanilla, and asked both Vex and Delvin for extra work. Random, I know, but only then will you be able to speak to Glover Mallory all the way over in Raven Rock on Solstheim to ask him about the Thieves Guild shadow mark on his doorframe. So basically, if you hadn't completed the previous steps by chance before speaking to Glover Mallory on Solstheim, then you would have no idea that he has a Thieves Guild related quest to offer, though you may well be suspicious of his second name. Anyway, Glover will give you a quest to retrieve the formula for bone mold armor that has been stolen from him by a chap called Esmond Tyne. Once you do this for him, he will allow you to help yourself to anything you want in his basement stash, which is a pretty decent haul in its own right. However, the most important item here is an unsent letter that reveals that Sapphire is in fact his daughter. And despite the fact that the quest for Mallory has been finished at this point and there is no quest objective related to this letter, if you take it upon yourself to interfere in this deeply personal family matter, because hey, why not, then you can deliver this letter to Sapphire in Riften, who will give you the Exquisite Sapphire as a reward. Here's the thing though, when you get to Riften, this quest has yet another layer of obscurity added to it. And this is due to the fact that Sapphire won't even speak to you about the letter unless you've already completed a totally unrelated activity for her in Riften, which involves settling the debt of a man called Shadir. If you haven't done this, then you can't even open any dialogue with her at all. So given the very specific sequence of events that needs to happen, as well as it not being a marked objective to begin with, you can see why a hell of a lot of people miss this one. Now, number 9 is a really quick one. It's another unmarked quest objective that leads on from a larger quest, but what's really interesting about this one is that the quest is actually part of the game's main story, making it the best qualified objective to be referred to as hidden in plain sight, at least in my opinion. This is the hidden objective in which you can actually return the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller to Ustengrav after having given it to the Greybeards in order to progress the main storyline. There is no prompt whatsoever to do so, and you can't even see the horn in your inventory as far as I can tell. However, if you head back to Ustengrav on your own steam, you can indeed return the horn to the very spot from which Delphine pinched it and left you that rather annoying note. And if you do, you'll even be granted a free dragon soul as a reward. Okay, finally we've arrived at number 10. And you remember Malborn, right? Well, no, of course you don't, because you forgot about him the second that he completed his job for you at the Falmore Embassy, didn't you? And then promptly allowed him to be murdered by that frost troll on the way out. Yeah, I'm onto you. However, did you know that if you somehow managed to prevent Malborn's untimely and seemingly inevitable demise as you're escaping the Falmore Embassy, that there is actually a little more to his story? If Malborn does manage to survive the escape, then he will complain about the fact that the Falmore are going to be hunting him forever and then run off into the distance, presumably to never be seen again. However, despite there being no follow-up or even the slightest hint of a subsequent quest, if you randomly walk into the Corner Club in Windhelm post the events of the Falmore Embassy, you will find Malborn there, subject to it not bugging out completely, which happened to me whilst trying to film this video. It eventually seemed to work after I returned to Delphine and then waited a few days before heading to Windhelm. Anyway, if you speak to Malborn in the Corner Club, he will explain how he's now trying to escape Skyrim, but fears that an assassin is waiting for him at the Windhelm gates, and he gives you a quest to investigate. It turns out that this is true, providing you run to the main gate, then over the bridge, and then all the way around the stables to speak to Rissard, the leader of the Khajiit caravan, who typically has nothing to do with assassins. Oh, and you need to do this before the secret one-day timer runs out, before the Khajiit caravan disappears from this spot forever and you're unable to complete the quest. Seriously, I'm surprised that anyone ever completed this quest naturally. Anyway, good old Rissard immediately snitches on his fellow Khajiit, and you can then dispatch that Khajiit to ensure Malborn's safe departure from Skyrim. Best of luck in Morrowind, Malborn. You have discharged your duties in Skyrim with great Wait a minute, he only left a 250 gold reward for us. I hope he steps in Siltstrider dung. Okay, so how many of these did you know? And are there any secret or hidden quests that you would add to the list? If so, please put them in the comments down below so I can steal your ideas for future videos. Oh wait, I wasn't meant to read that part of the script out loud, damn it. Anyway, thanks once again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to protect your online data by heading over to surfshark.com and using code Vress to get yourself a substantial discount today. And as always, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.